The blizzard raged with merciless intensity, transforming the world into a swirling chaos of white and gray. Through the violent snowfall, Roman Dmitri stood like a monument carved from iron, utterly unmoved by the elements that would have broken lesser men. The guard's challenge hung in the frozen air, demanding identification from the strangers who dared approach Luna Fortress in its darkest hour. Roman drew a breath that seemed to pull the very cold into his lungs, then released it as a thunderous proclamation that cut through the howling wind like a blade through silk. His voice carried power that transcended mere volume. "I am Roman Dmitri, Lord of the Dmitri Kingdom." The words resonated with such authority that even the stone walls seemed to tremble. The declaration wasn't a request for entry, it was an announcement of inevitability. Behind those massive gates, countless souls huddled in terror, clinging to hope that had grown dangerously thin. They heard that voice pierce through their despair like the first ray of dawn breaking an endless night. The guard stationed above peered down through the relentless snowfall, his vision obscured by the weather and his growing confusion. His armor creaked as he leaned forward, trying to reconcile what he saw with what he'd been told to expect. Luna had been promised 30 reinforcements from Dmitri, warriors who would turn the tide against the overwhelming orc invasion. But the reality before him seemed like a cruel mockery of those promises. Only 3 figures stood in the snow below, their forms barely visible through the white curtain of the storm. The guard's voice carried a mixture of desperation and suspicion as he called down his question. "The report said 30 would come. Why do I see only 3? It was a reasonable inquiry that concealed deeper fears. 3 warriors against the thousands of orcs that had shattered their divine barriers and slaughtered their defenders seemed like an insult worse than abandonment. The guard's next question came tinged with desperate hope. Was Lord Caden among them? Perhaps their own champion had returned with these mysterious reinforcements. What the guard couldn't see from his elevated position was the trap that had been meticulously prepared below. Scattered throughout the courtyard and concealed by strategic positioning, orc warriors waited with weapons ready. They had draped themselves in stolen cloaks and positioned themselves to appear as Luna defenders from a distance. Their breathing was controlled despite their savage nature, fingers trembling with anticipation on weapon hilts. The trap had been set with cunning intelligence. Lure the reinforcements close to the walls, then spring the ambush when escape became impossible. Every orc eye fixed on those 3 vulnerable humans standing exposed in the open courtyard. But Roman Dmitri had already seen through the deception. His hand moved with deliberate purpose to the sword at his waist. The sound of steel sliding free from its scabbard rang out clear, despite the howling wind, a sound that promised violence and judgment in equal measure. He stood before Luna's gates not as a supplicant seeking entry, but as a conqueror claiming what was already his by right. His next words would shatter whatever remained of the old order. Roman's voice cut through the storm with absolute finality. Luna Kingdom has become a vassal state of Dmitri. It wasn't a proposal or a negotiation, it was a statement of accomplished fact. To prove his authority, he raised his hand high, displaying the medallion that Caden had entrusted to him. The emblem caught what little light penetrated the gray storm clouds, gleaming with unmistakable legitimacy. This was no theft or forgery. This was the genuine article, marking him as Luna's rightful superior. His gaze swept upward to the guards manning the walls, his eyes burning with intensity that transcended the physical storm. From this moment forward, the people of Luna answer to me alone. The declaration carried implications that reached far beyond mere military alliance. Sovereignty itself was being transferred in the midst of a war zone, with enemy forces literally hidden among them. Then his tone shifted, taking on a quality that bordered on sacred oath. "Swear your loyalty to me, and I will not abandon you. I will fight until my last breath to ensure every single one of you survives this nightmare." Inside the fortress where captive civilians had been bound and corralled by their orc captors, those words penetrated through stone and snow alike. Mothers who had lost all hope felt something stir in their hearts, something they'd thought dead. Old men who had resigned themselves to becoming orc meals lifted their faces from the ground, tears mixing with the grime on their weathered cheeks. Children stopped their quiet sobbing and listened to that voice promising salvation. Roman's conviction wasn't just audible, it was tangible, a force that pushed back against the despair that had consumed them. But the orcs had been listening too. Kolat, the cunning lieutenant commanding the ambush force, felt alarm bells ringing in his mind. Something in Roman's bearing, in the purple flicker beginning to manifest in the human's eyes, warned him that the trap was about to turn catastrophic. His voice erupted in a guttural command that shook the very air. "Attack! I'd kill them now." But the order came a heartbeat too late. Roman moved faster than thought itself. Before Khalid's words could fully register with his troops, the human lord was already channeling power that defied natural law. His eyes blazed with brilliant purple light, the unmistakable signature of the heavenly demon sword art. The air itself seemed to warp and scream as concentrated energy gathered around his blade. For one impossible moment, the snowfall itself seemed to freeze in place, suspended by the sheer magnitude of power being unleashed. The first form tore through reality with apocalyptic force. Roman's blade swept toward the massive fortress gates in an arc that carried the weight of divine judgment. The reinforced iron that had withstood countless sieges simply ceased to exist. The stone walls flanking the entrance, structures that had been built to last centuries, exploded into dust and fragments. The shockwave alone sent orcs tumbling through the air like children's toys. In a single devastating instant, Roman had erased the boundary between outside and inside, transforming the fortress's primary defensive position into a gaping wound. Even as debris was still falling from his catastrophic attack, Roman's voice rang out with tactical precision. Chris, Kevin. His trusted warriors immediately locked onto his words despite the chaos erupting around them. Your mission is to locate and extract the prisoners. Do not expect safety. We are outnumbered 1,000 to 3. His honesty was brutal but necessary. There was no room for illusions in this slaughterhouse. Your only objective is to kill everything standing between you and those captives. Show no mercy because you will receive none. Both men responded with immediate acknowledgement, their own combat auras flaring to life like twin stars igniting in the darkness. Chris's energy manifested as a brilliant gold that seemed to burn away the very shadows. Kevin's aura pulsed with deep crimson intensity. Without hesitation or fear, they charged forward into the heart of enemy territory where thousands of orcs waited. Their faces showed no doubt, only the grim determination of warriors who had absolute faith in their commander's plan. The scene shifted backward through time, pulling away from the violence to a quieter moment heavy with grief. After receiving confirmation that Luna Fortress had fallen to the orcish invasion, Caden had stood before Roman with the expression of a man attending his own funeral. The characteristic light in his eyes, the fire that had defined him as one of Luna's legendary champions, had been extinguished completely. Only a hollow emptiness remained where pride and purpose once dwelled. His voice was steady but lifeless as he delivered his farewell. The fortress has fallen. Luna is lost. Each word seemed to cost him physically, as though speaking them carved pieces from his soul. He looked at Roman with gratitude mixed with profound sorrow. I can no longer ask you to remain here. Thank you for coming all this way from your homeland. Your willingness to help will not be forgotten, even if there's no Luna Kingdom left to remember it. Caden bowed deeply, his forehead nearly touching his knees in a gesture of absolute respect and finality. I apologize that we cannot repay your kindness. This was our fight, not yours. His eyes had gone dead, reflecting the corpse of hope. In his mind, asking warriors from another nation to die for Luna's mistakes was unconscionable. The only honorable path remaining was to part ways here, allowing Roman to return home safely while Caden marched alone to join his fallen kingdom in death. But Roman's expression remained as unmoved as mountain stone. No pity softened his features. No fear flickered in his gaze. He looked at Caden with the cold clarity of someone who saw the absolute truth of a situation. When he spoke, his words carried the weight of immutable law. From the moment Dmitri formed an alliance with Luna, your kingdom became our vassal state. The fate of that vassal is no longer yours to decide. It belongs to Dmitri. You no longer possess the authority to surrender or retreat. The logic was ruthlessly absolute. By accepting Dmitri's protection and resources, Luna had surrendered its right to give up. Roman would not permit his investment to simply collapse because its people had lost hope. His expression hardened further as he issued his command. Tell me everything about the fortress. Floor plans, guard positions, enemy numbers, structural weaknesses, hidden passages, every detail you possess. Now. Caden's dead eyes flickered with something resembling shock. That small spark of renewed life was enough to break through his despair. His voice gained strength as he began describing his homeland in minute detail, providing information that would have been considered treasonous under any other circumstances. But Luna was already fallen. What did secrets matter to the dead? Together they crafted a strategy that bordered on suicidal. A pincer operation utilizing Luna's secret passages would split their already minimal forces into two groups facing overwhelming odds. The main element, 27 of Dmitri's elite soldiers led by Caden himself, would navigate the treacherous mountain paths to reach a hidden cave entrance. This group would infiltrate deep into the fortress's interior, using passages known only to Luna's highest-ranking defenders. Meanwhile, Roman would lead Chris and Kevin in a frontal assault on the main gate. 3 men would draw the attention of thousands, becoming bait so obvious that no orc commander could resist committing forces to crush them. The plan required perfect timing, absolute trust, and a level of individual combat capability that bordered on mythical. Caden led the main infiltration force through passages carved into the mountain itself centuries ago. Their torches cast dancing shadows against damp stone walls that dripped with melted snow. The narrow tunnel forced them into single file, their breathing and equipment creating a rhythmic echo that threatened to give away their position. Anxiety gnawed at Caden despite his best efforts to project confidence. He glanced back at the Dmitri soldiers following in disciplined silence and asked the question that had been eating at him. "Do you truly believe this plan can succeed?" The response came without hesitation from the soldier directly behind him. "Of course it will succeed." The answer was delivered with such complete certainty, such utter absence of doubt, that it silenced Caden's fears more effectively than any reassurance could have. He studied these men more carefully, seeing past their armor to the absolute conviction in their eyes. They didn't hope their commander's plan would work. They knew it would. That level of unwavering faith spoke to something profound about Roman Dmitri's leadership. Caden's thoughts turned philosophical as they pressed deeper into the mountain. Luna needed exactly this kind of leader. Someone who inspired such absolute loyalty that doubt became impossible. Perhaps surrendering sovereignty to Dmitri wasn't the tragedy he'd initially believed. If this was the caliber of warriors Dmitri's system produced, then Luna would be safer as a vassal than it had ever been as an independent kingdom desperately clinging to fading glory. The tunnel suddenly widened, and Caden's practiced eye caught movement ahead. 2 orc scouts wandered through the cave system, their ugly features twisted in confusion as they processed the unexpected sight of intruders. Before Caden could even reach for his weapon or shout a warning, 2 Dmitri soldiers exploded into motion with predatory grace. The orcs didn't stand a chance. Before they could bellow an alarm or raise their weapons, blades found their throats with surgical precision. The kills were silent, efficient, and absolutely merciless. Both bodies crumpled to the cave floor without ceremony. Caden stood frozen in shock. He'd fought orcs his entire adult life and knew intimately how dangerous they were. Their thick hides could turn aside poorly aimed strikes. Their berserker strength could shatter shields and bones alike. Yet these Dmitri soldiers had dispatched them as easily as cutting wheat. The speed, the accuracy, the complete absence of wasted motion, it spoke to training that transcended anything Luna's military academies could produce. As they pressed forward through the tunnels, systematically eliminating every orc patrol they encountered, Caden's understanding underwent a fundamental transformation. When he'd first heard that Dmitri was sending only 30 reinforcements, he'd felt insulted. 30 men against thousands seemed like a joke, a token gesture that would accomplish nothing but add 30 more corpses to the pile. But now, watching these warriors move through the darkness like shadows given lethal purpose, he understood the terrible truth. These weren't ordinary soldiers. Each one of them was worth 100 normal warriors. The infiltration group moved with mechanical efficiency, executing orcs before the creatures could raise an alarm. Their blades found vital points with unerring accuracy even in the dim torchlight. Caden felt something he hadn't experienced in days, genuine hope. Not the desperate fantasy of a drowning man, but the solid confidence born from witnessing undeniable capability. He whispered a prayer to gods he'd nearly lost faith in, thanking them for sending Roman Dmitri when Luna needed salvation most desperately. Back at the shattered main gate, the situation had evolved into pure chaos. Kolot had screamed orders for his troops to overwhelm the 3 humans through sheer numbers. The mathematics seemed undeniable. Thousands against 3 could only end one way. The orcish horde surged forward like a tsunami of green flesh and rusted iron, their collective roar shaking the very foundations of the mountain. The ground trembled under the weight of so many charging bodies converging on a single point. But Roman Dmitri stood immovable, a pillar of defiance against the incoming tide. His blade swept in a devastating horizontal arc, and reality itself seemed to buckle under the force. A shockwave of pure kinetic energy erupted outward, sending dozens of orcs tumbling through the air like leaves caught in a hurricane. The purple aura surrounding Roman intensified until he appeared to be wreathed in dark flames that consumed everything they touched. He moved through the orcish ranks like death incarnate, each strike finding a throat, each movement ending a life. The orcs fought with berserk abandon, driven by bloodlust and their commander's orders. They trampled over their own fallen comrades in their desperation to reach the human who was carving through their ranks. An orc champion swung a massive battle axe toward Roman's head with enough force to split a boulder. Roman didn't bother blocking or parrying. He simply wasn't there when the weapon arrived, his body flowing around the attack like water around stone. Then he used the orc's own weapon as a stepping stone, launching himself upward to deliver a killing strike before his enemy even understood what had happened. Roman channeled even greater power into his blade, his purple aura intensifying to blinding brilliance. The heavenly demon sword art's second form manifested with apocalyptic force. For one heartbeat, the entire battlefield seemed to hold its breath in anticipation of the destruction about to be unleashed. Then, the world exploded. A massive detonation of concentrated energy tore through the earth itself, creating a crater that swallowed dozens of orcs instantly. Boulders the size of houses were thrown hundreds of feet into the air along with broken bodies. The snow vaporized in a radius around the blast, exposing scorched earth beneath. The surviving orcs finally showed genuine fear. The berserker rage that had driven them forward evaporated, replaced by primal terror. They had conquered kingdoms and devoured armies, but they had never faced anything like this. Their voices cracked as they screamed the only word that could describe what they were witnessing. Monster. But before they could flee or even finish their panicked cries, Chris and Kevin were among them, their own combat prowess creating a slaughter that complemented Roman's destruction perfectly. Orcs stationed on the fortress wall suddenly realized they had enemies in both directions. They turned to find Dmitri's soldiers emerging from the fortress's interior. Caden's infiltration force had successfully reached their objective. The soldiers moved with cold precision, cutting through orcs who had thought themselves safe behind the walls. The pincer operation had worked exactly as planned. The enemy was now caught between two forces of overwhelming individual capability. Kolat stood in the middle of the chaos, his tactical mind finally grasping the full horror of their situation. They had underestimated Dmitri catastrophically. What they'd assumed was a weak human kingdom was actually something far more dangerous. His 10,000 warriors were being systematically annihilated by 30. The humiliation transcended military defeat. It was an existential crisis that shattered everything the orcs believed about their own superiority. Desperation drove Kolat to his final gambit. He screamed for the shaman, and from the center of the orcish formation a withered creature draped in bones and fetishes hobbled forward. The shaman's voice rose in a high-pitched rhythmic chant that seemed to rot the very air it touched. Dark energy pulsed outward in waves, infecting every orc it touched with corrupting power. Their eyes turned blood red, glowing with unnatural light. Their consciousness fled, replaced by magical compulsion that stripped away everything except the drive to kill. The transformed orcs became something worse than soldiers. They became weapons with no off switch. Pain meant nothing to them. An orc missing an arm continued fighting with the other, its face showing no recognition of the injury. Another creature with its guts spilling onto the snow simply held them in with one hand while swinging its weapon with the other. They had transcended fear and pain, becoming extensions of the shaman's dark will. One of these magically enhanced orcs, despite having sustained mortal wounds, rose from where it had fallen. Its eyes burned with that terrible red glow as it spotted Kevin engaged in combat with 3 other enemies. The creature grabbed its massive axe and hurled it with remaining strength. The weapon spun through the air in a deadly arc, aimed directly at Kevin's unprotected back. The whistling sound was barely audible over the battle's chaos, and Kevin was completely focused on the immediate threats before him. The axe flew toward his skull with lethal accuracy, promising death from an unexpected angle.